Well, thank you all for attending today's webinar on how natural language processing and artificial intelligence will propel people analytics in HR. Sorry for the rocky start. This webinar is sponsored by TrenData. And let me start off and just review the agenda on what we're going to cover today. So we'll start off and talk a little bit about who TrenData is, very little bit of time. And then we'll launch into the meat of the presentation, define actually what natural language processing is, what are some basic NLP methodologies, and then how natural language processing can not only function but flourish in an HR environment. Then we'll talk a little bit about how a particular people analytics solution can use natural language processing, followed by a demonstration of such on the TrenData solution. We'll try to make the webinar not too salesy. I want to get you some good basic topical information out, and we'll use our system just as a vehicle to demonstrate some of the methodologies. And we'll save some room at the end for questions. If you have a question in the meantime, if you will use the chat facility, I'll be able to pull those questions off at the end and answer them one at a time. Okay, well, just a little bit about TrenData. We are a cloud-based people analytics solution. We give you the ability to pull data from multiple HR sources so that you can have a holistic view of your HR and talent data. We allow you to build metrics from those sources, trend them into analytics, and actually give you a full functioning history of patterns and such so that you can actually do predictive analytics and modeling. We're located in Plano, Texas, where, if you can tell by the map, is just a stone's throw north of Dallas. The company was founded by myself. I'm the CEO, and my partner, Mon Hamden. He was actually the founder of HR Smart. He's our chairman. Actually, most of our senior executives are from HR Smart, which was a very successful talent management company. And so all of our people have a very deep domain experience in HR and talent software. Just a smattering of some of our customers there, just to let you know that if you ever did something with TrenData, we'd be able to provide you a reference in your industry. So natural language processing, what is it? There's a lot of definitions out there, but essentially I found this one to probably be the best. Historically, computers have really just treated text as a sequence of symbols. You know, a T or an A was a series of zeros and ones, and it just had a mathematical connotation behind the scenes. What NLP, or natural language processing, is doing, it considers more of the intent or the actual meaning of the words, you know, both from a hierarchical structure of language and from what is actually typed or spoken. It also has to take into accountability nuance, synonyms, things like that. So moving away from treating words as just the front end of numbers to what they actually mean. I always like this for you biblical scholars, the Tower of Babel, which basically was back in way ancient times, where the world tried to build a tower, and God got mad at them and gave them all different languages so they couldn't communicate, and the tower never got built. Just using this to emphasize the fact that language isn't always precise. In addition to different languages, English, French, and the myriad of others, even people who speak the same language don't always communicate the same, which is evidenced by this phrase from George Bernard Shaw, who talked about English in America being two countries separated by a common language. But all that, I'd like to point out, you know, today in the environment, the web has just automated and made so many things so easy. So, for example, if you want to look for something today, you don't go to the library, you don't go to the newspaper reel anymore. You go out to the web, you pull up one of your browsers in Google, you type what you're looking for, and the engine actually analyzes what you've typed in, looking for things like keywords, roots of words, and determining what you're wanting to look for. So in this one, for example, you know, even the word is pizzeria, the system is able to look and see pizza is the root of it, and determine from the entity that you're not looking how to make a pizza, but you're looking where to find the nearest pizza. But the entire word there is pizzeria. So what happens when you type in that? You get a series of choices ranked in the order of closest to the search. So I do that in my area here, and the first thing that comes up is an actual pizzeria, something that calls itself a pizzeria, Giuliano's Pizzeria. The second one is a place that actually serves pizza but doesn't call itself a pizzeria. And the third, I joke, is a place that actually claims to sell pizza, but it's more of a kid's place or whatever. But the system does pick out the logic from what you're looking for through the expanse of what's gone on in searches before. Now you take that and apply that a little more deeply, other than just keying on certain words. You can go a little deeper and determine a few other things, such as, what is the central idea of the search that you're looking for. So, for example, in this, where it's more of an HR search, and you look for how many days does it take to fill an open position. It's not exactly specific. You're not looking at a specific position or in a department, but it has to extract something of the central idea. So how many will tell you that it's a quantity you're looking for, and take to fill tells you that it's going to be a number. Now you'll have to factor in other things like the position and days, so you know that it's not giving you a prescription and it's not asking how many pills does it take to fill or something. Again, drilling down a little deeper, natural language is able to determine other things like sentiment. So for example, the keyword in this particular search is actually turnover, but the nuance of the search is able, in natural language, is able to say, well, you're not just looking for turnover, you're looking for what are the problems from turnover. And you're not looking for it industry-wise, you're looking for within your span of domain. So it might be that you're the CEO of a company looking for turnover within your company, or it might be that you're the head of a work group that's maybe 20 people, and it might even be able to slim it down based on the histories of your searches and looking just, do you have a problem with turnover within your particular group. So there's a lot of things that have to go into the searching in natural language, but when you look at how it actually works, it's like anything else human-oriented, is you have an artificial intelligence engine that's going to learn from the more queries that are put in. So you might start out with your AI platform, pushing in things like, you throw in a whole glossary of terms that you want the AI engine to remember. You can assign also some grammatic rules so that it can look and understand sentence structure. And then you might also have programming rules that can go even beyond that, and maybe tell it to search different languages or something. So you can start it out with a base of a lot of knowledge, but really what makes the engine and the capabilities flourish is when you start using it. So for example, you put in a query, and like in the one I showed earlier, you get a series of results ranked based on how the system, what gets you closest to what you actually asked for. But then what happens from there is the platform will take a look and see, well, which ones did people click on? So if the original ranking was 1, 2, 3 like it is there, but 70% of the people clicked on result 2, eventually that result 2 is going to be the result 1 from the same query as things get used. And for example, if result 3 never gets clicked on, maybe that will just be chucked out, and the system knows that that's not something that is answering the question of the searches. And again, it takes this information, feeds it back in, and also accumulates more data along the way. So for example, you might have in that second query a synonym or something from a different language, or a nuance that was constantly used that might be in the same paragraph as the actual word or sentiment you're looking on. And then the system can kind of pick up on that and see, like, well, we associate sliding into home with baseball or something like that, and the system will continue to learn that. And of course, the more you do it, the more intelligent it gets, and your searches become much more robust and able to cover a great deal more ground. Now Now, to make that jump and take it over and look at HR, there's several different types of data that you have in HR. Now, fortunately, which makes the use of this type of system very easy, not very easy, but probably gives it a much more of a head start than just searching the World Wide Web, is that most of the data in HR is structured data. Structured data is data that has somehow been organized into some formatted repository, usually data that comes out of a system. So it could be your HRIS system, could be your talent system, could also be a flat file sitting in an Excel or a CSV format, because that's organized by cells, so it's able to bring that in kind of a formatted repository. The other extreme is unstructured data, and there's getting to be more and more of that pulled into what HR is using to conduct its daily business. So examples of unstructured data that don't fit into that formatted repository are things like Word documents. So you might still have companies that are doing their performance reviews on a legacy Word processor, or collecting emails for feedback on various candidates or various processes. And then it gets even more of that. You can have texts, you can have photos, you can have voice. If you're incorporating possibly a performance review or something else that might be just taken on a recording. So that's the far extreme in HR and unstructured data. The way you make that data useful, you turn it into kind of semi-structured data, is you're able to kind of key things in the data, which kind of goes back to what we're talking about in the NLP. So you're able to key, for example, performance or compensation or candidate or recruit, so that when the system wants to go out and make use of what's out in the kind of in your ecosphere, it can find those particular documents or pieces of information that aren't structured and pull them into your analysis format. Now, the big advantage that you have, and it's a little bit of a quandary as to why the web is so far ahead of business and personal applications. When you think of it, for Google and other search engines to actually search the web, they have to use the entirety of not only English, but all the other human language that is out there. Whereas inside business applications, such as HR, you do have somewhat of a finite world of terms. I just put a few up here. HR terms from some of the more renowned organizations like the HCI Institute, SHRM, ResearchGate has published lists of terms, the glossary of terms in HR. And you can see it's not huge. HRCI has 600, SHRM is the largest amongst these with 900 terms, but all under 1,000. Now, this can get exponentiated because often you're looking for these types of terms, filtered by various things. So you might, as I pointed out earlier, you might be looking for turnover by department, or performance by a particular location, or compensation by a particular job level. So when you have a plethora of filters like that, you can turn these 600, 900, 500 into 6,000, 20,000, 70,000. But the positive thing, it is really still a finite universe, not even approaching what the web searches are looking at. So to give you an idea on how TrenData uses NLP and the logic of building a natural language process, you would go into, and I'll show examples of it, but you would go into a particular search, and whatever it is, I'm looking for a particular metric filtered by something. What the system does initially is goes out and sees, is that a metric that's already built in the system? So if you already have a cost of hire metric, and you're able to break it down by department and location, it'll navigate through the system and find that view for you and allow you to look at it and jump right to it, and yet really don't have to do anything. The second part of the logic is if the metric is not there, but the data exists somewhere, either within the system or in one of your source systems, or even within an external big data source that you're not using, it can actually go out and grab that data and build the metric for you. So the first bit of logic is, do we have it built? When you type it in, it'll go right to it. If you don't have it built, it'll go out and create it. And the third bar, which actually I don't have here, is if the data doesn't exist, the system's going to tell you that and either tell you to go get some data or work with a consultant or something to bring that data into the system. The left side, taking you to a specific view, is something that we've seen around there that some competitors have, but being able to build metrics on the fly is something that's really new in the industry. So what on top down is what like a technology solution can help you do with this particular technology to really take it to the next level. Is first of all, being able to do that, to quickly navigate and finding and creating metrics. And as you see more companies out there start to use natural language processing, you'll find the ease of use of these systems getting a lot more advancing. But the ability, again, to create the metrics and do things on the fly is a really new innovation. You can also, build your personalized dashboards once you've searched out and found and built all these metrics, and then you can trend them to analytics. And then also off of that same AI platform, which can not only grab data and put together metrics and analytics for you, it also pulls in all that history so that you can actually start to do modeling. It's turnover's going up. What happens if I do this? Will it make it go down? If I do this, will it affect my high performers more than my non-high performers? Or if I do this, am I going to spend a lot of money and get no return at all? So the second benefit of AI after the NLP is this ability to do the modeling and predicting. So at this point, I was going to jump out and just do a quick demonstration more to illustrate those particular points that I was talking about. So if you'll stay with me, I will quickly jump to a system. And so what we have right now is a blank dashboard. We've uploaded some data into the system, and we have the ability to go out and create metrics. So we do have certain top-level metrics that are created within the system, but we're going to use the natural language processing to build out our dashboard based on specifically what we want. So let's start out with something like compensation. So if I wanted to look for the average compensation by job level, that's probably something that's in the system because I do have a compensation metric. So if I click on that, it's going to look through the system and actually find that I have the ability to generate a metric which shows me average compensation by job level. Now, for example, I wanted to look a little deeper on that. Do I have any industry data in the system? You might have seen when I typed it before, the query came up as to would I like to compare that to some industry data. So if I have that in the system, it'll enhance this particular metric. And as you see, when I do that, yes, it does. It does have the ability to either go out and grab or use some industry data in the system. And I can see that I'm actually doing okay, paying my people a little bit above the industry averages that I have out there, maybe in one area. In staff, I'm not, but all the other positions I am. So this is something I'd like to keep track of on a regular basis. So I can actually go out and add that to my dashboard and name it whatever I want. And that is now out on my dashboard. Now, again, that's an example of data that was in the system at first. Then I was able to import some other data from outside to build the metric. Let's look at another example on that. So for example, I have the number of employees. I have maybe their addresses in something in the system. Is there a way I can look at how far my employees commute to get to work every day? So if I go in and type in, employees by commute distance, it's going to go and give me a graph that tells me the number of employees I have commuting less than a mile to work, a little more than that, and it shows me that most of my employees are commuting more than 20 miles to work. Now, this is another example of where the data was in the system, but the metric wasn't created. It actually went out and used Google Maps to be able to take those dates and create a commute metric. So again, I might want to save this one to my dashboard and call it whatever I want. Now let's look at one where we don't have the data in the system, and it has to go. We don't have the metric created, but the data is actually all in the system. And we would like to create something like, I know I have this year's and last year's salary, but I don't have anything that tells me what the average raise was. So for example, if I typed in show the average of users' salary, it will actually go out and calculate a metric for me, which is not previously in the system. So it's telling me last year the average salary of everybody in the company put together is $4,071. So over here, you'll notice that the system is making a query. Is that what I was actually looking for? So I could either go in here and just say yes. And what it's going to let me do then is build that metric. So if I click on add this to the dashboard, it's going to ask me what are the different formats I can put it in. So I can either put it in a bar graph, or I can just put it in as a number. I'll do it as a bar graph just to make it a little more graphical, and just call it 2018 salary increase. And that'll now save that to the dashboard as well. Now the last part of the search that I wanted to look at is, you saw at the end I talked a little bit about intent in searches. So one, you're keying on certain words. It's allowing you to drill down by various ports. But what about something that I'm really wanting to know if I have a problem, like say for turnover. So if I typed in, do I have a turnover problem? See, I've asked that question before. The system is going to jump to turnover, but not just giving me a straight up turnover number. It's actually going a little deeper than that, because it sensed that I wanted to find out, do I have a real problem? So not only is it showing that turnover is on the rise, but that voluntary turnover is on the rise. And that's essentially people who are leaving the company on their own, and not because we're letting them go because of performance. So that tends to lead me to believe that I do have a turnover problem. So I can now take also this analytic and post it onto the dashboard. So now if I go back to my dashboard, you can see I've set up a nice grouping of metrics that I have. Some of them I might want to give a little more real estate to, like this analytics. So I can spread that out. It'll show me the ability to look at that in a little more detail. I might also want to spread these out or move them around. And then on top of it, I might want to just add a few of the top line metrics. I would like to know organizationally just how many employees I have at the company. I might want to know the average number of absences. And perhaps in recruiting, I might want to look at, what is my average time to fill? So I can go and add that. So now I go back, and you can see I've now got a pretty full dashboard set up any way that I want to look at it. And now I have the ability to go out and do a little more analysis. So you'll see under each metric, there are 3 options. There's the ability to drill down on the metric, because we talked about that in the natural language. So that's how the natural language was kind of filtering to find things. So if I wanted to drill down just on the number of employees and look at them by, I had it defaulted going there to commute distance, but I could also look at it by department. And it will tell me the number of employees I have. And it'll always provide the list of the employees down here. And if I wanted to show different fields down there, I can, such as hire date and perhaps salary. And I might want to move those around if I want, and then save that particular view. So every time I go in, I'll get to see all of this. You can also multi-filter it. So I'm looking at it by department right now, but I might want to be able to go out and look at it by department, maybe just in a certain city. And so maybe Chicago, see if I have anybody. So it shows I only have people in commercial banking and consumer banking in Chicago, and it lists them down at the bottom there. So I have a filtered view if I want to take a look at that. Let me go back to the turnover, because that's where I can really show the second ping is the ability to do predictive analytics. So turnover, we got a good look here as to what turnover is going forward. Let me go back to that analytic and drill on that a little deeper. So this is telling me turnover by separation, voluntary and involuntary. So are those involuntary turnovers high performers? So I might go and take that particular view and look at it a little better. And as was my suspicion, not only is turnover going up, but high performing turnover is really starting to go up. We have, you can see that the trend started at a certain area. So I can actually go out and put in what's called an events overlay, which might tell me did something happen at a particular time. And right when that high performer turnover started to go up, we had an acquisition. So perhaps a new level of managers came in with the acquisition, and a lot of these high performers who were hoping to move up in their career started seeing roadblocks in their way and started moving out. So that might be something that you have to address down the line. So let's play around with that a little bit and move over to our predictive view. So when I go into the predictive view, what it's actually doing is showing me what's going to keep happening if I don't do anything. So this shows that turnover is on the rise in those last 6 months, as we saw, and it's actually going to peak in this month at a very high level of 5.5%. If you aggregate that over the year, that's more like a 60 to 70% turnover rate annually, which I don't think any of us would find really acceptable. So let's see what happens if maybe we can put some things in place to tamp that down a bit. So if I move from this summary view, which the individual view, which I showed early, to a summary view, it brings up a lot of the factors in this instance which are actually attributed to turnover. So we can talk about salary, remote employees, quality of life, and then we also can see productivity loss, recruiting costs of having to replace these positions, and as well as high performer and low performer turnover. So I'm actually going to turn on that view again and look at this by performance as we move forward. So you can see the pattern is still the same. Things start to trickle off a little bit, but not in a totally acceptable format. So based on our history, let's go out and do a little modeling and see what happens when we change a few things. So when I click on the modeling, you'll notice a few of the fields have become live. So I can actually experiment as to what's going to happen going forward. So you can see that the average salary is about $135,000 for the entire company. And right now that's going to predicted to stay pretty steady. Now you'll remember earlier we pointed out that we are paying a little over industry average company-wide. Let's see what happens if we go in and give everybody, say, an average of $5,000 raise. So I bring the average salary up to $140,000. You'll see that really didn't affect much. Turnover went from 5.5 to 5.37. So I've just spent about $5 million in my 1,000-person company and got very little return on my investment. So maybe I won't do that just now. I'll reset that back to what I have. We do have a pretty aggressive work from home policy, and you can see over a third of our employees are actually working from home. What would happen if we increase that? So that's that seems to be pretty popular. Maybe I up that 10% to 45%. That does have a decent effect. It brings the total turnover down by about 1.2%. But I'm still really having a tough time with my high performers, even though they're going down with the rest of the population. It's still about a 2-to-1 ratio, and that's still a very high performer turnover ratio. Okay, if I go down to this, and remember I looked at that prior graphic, and it showed me most of it started happening when I made the acquisition of the other company. Our number of high performers in professional development has fallen very low to like less than 7%. So on top of the acquisition, I'm not training a lot of my high performers. So maybe I have to show them that I want to invest in them and make them future leaders in the company. So what happens if I increase that? just double it for now. Aha, so that seems to have a much better effect on high performer turnover. And you can see that the system then makes a recommendation. Not only should you do this now, you should start increasing it as you go forward, because that's going to keep your high performer and future potentials there. And now you can see that high performance is actually even now down below where it was at the beginning of the period, and on a continual downtrend. So that's probably the one we need to invest our money in rather than in salaries. And we can decide if we want to keep the remote employee, if it makes sense. That didn't seem to cost much, so we'll keep that at what it is. So two looks at the artificial intelligence, the predictive modeling, and the natural language processing. So kind of give you a taste. Let me go back to the presentation real quick and finish things out here. So at this point, before I go a little further, I would like to address some of the questions I've seen come across. I did get one, looks like it was more product related, but it does ask, does the natural language processing come standard with a TrenData system? The answer is yes. If you buy our system, you get that search bar, and the natural language processing is actually something that comes with your system. Okay, got another one that came across here is, does your company provide benchmarking data? We do provide some benchmarking data. If you want us to go out and gather it for you, we'll do that. We have some that we pull off the internet that's we'll bundle in with the system. We do also, if you've gone out and have salary survey data from salary.com or Mercer, anybody, we can easily import that. We can also bring in SHRM data for other statistics, like comparing against turnover within your industry and such. Oh, this is a good one. Can the AI model run the predictive models and give you the answer rather than you just running the scenarios? Yeah, that's actually the next step that we're looking at. Is right now we build it so you can do the models and do the inputting yourself. But we are looking at the next step, is where you just build the model and the system does what I did there automatically and tells you what the best solution is to let more people work from home and to increase professional services. So yeah, that is next on the roadmap. And then the final is what systems can you pull data from? We can pull data from any system that's out there. As long as if it has an open API, it's a very seamless thing. We can do flat file uploads. We can also, if you have a legacy system, use an ODBC connection to pull data. We have a very advanced capability of being able to pull in data not only from one but multiple systems. So, okay, is that the last question? Looks like it is. Let me go to the final slide. We do offer the ability to do a trial of our system. So if you want to take a look, it does include the natural language processing, but the predictive models we have to build out. So we don't include that in the basic trial, but we answer a lot of questions on it. And we do support it as if you were a real customer. And each of our support people is actually a data scientist, so they can actually answer some really advanced questions. So in addition to the product, you'll glean some free consulting out of the engagement as well. So we hope some of you will take advantage of it. Just send an email to marketing@trendata.com and we'll set you up. The promotional code actually should be TD-8-2018. You don't have to include that, but if you include that, we know that it came from this webinar, and that way we can kind of track the effectiveness of things. So last thing, last thing I have here is in thanking you all for your time, just want to let anybody who's going to HR Tech know that we will be exhibiting. Over to the right there is booth 428BG. That's where TrenData will be. Come by, and we'd love to talk to you and show you anything more that you might like to see. We're also participating in the first ever HR Tech Pitch Fest. So they took a group of 300 companies, narrowed it down to 30 who are actually going to be pitching their solutions in kind of a competition. So ours is actually Wednesday, September 12th from 3 to 4, and that's the location where all the pitch fests will be in the theater exhibit hall, which I think is booth number 1540. So come out, root us on. I'll be giving the presentation. I always like to pack the audience with as many friendlies as I can. So hopefully you'll come by, and we'd love to see you. And if you attended this webinar and come by our booth, we'll have a free shirt for you. So please come and see us. Okay, if that is the last question, I would like to thank everybody for their attendance, and have a nice day.